So I've just finished watching episode 2 of series 10 of Doctor Who, this episode being called Smile, and this is my review of it. I rather enjoyed this episode, I have to be honest. Most of you know that I tend to rail against New Doctor Who, and there's a lot of things that I don't like about New Doctor Who, but this episode felt more like a conventional episode of Doctor Who to me, and I'm going to go into detail as to why I felt that was the case. There's not a whole lot of cons that I have to discuss on this episode, which is unusual for my reviews. There's actually a lot of things that worked in this episode's favor, and so I'm going to go over the pros first, and then I'll go over my cons, because there's only like one or two things that I didn't really like about it. The visuals were really great on this episode. I liked all of the location shots, and their choices for set design and everything was really great. So I like that. It was kind of like a minimalist look, like the white walls. I think that's kind of something reminiscent of what you saw in the original series. And I'm not trying to suggest that the new series needs to copy what the original series did in terms of visuals in order for it to be good Doctor Who. I'm just saying that it lends more to a sense of being in the future when you don't make everything look like this industrial look. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but it just, in the universe of Doctor Who, it just doesn't fit, because it doesn't really look like it's much in the future. It looks more like it's set in present-day Earth. I am liking the companion, Bill. I liked her role in this episode because she was doing what the companion role for Doctor Who is meant to be. The companion is meant to be a mouthpiece for the audience. She's supposed to be there to ask questions, to ask the Doctor questions, to kind of speak for the audience in terms of learning more about what's going on. But more than that, though, she fulfilled the companion role in this episode, both in terms of being a mouthpiece for the audience, and she also filled this role as being a team member for the TARDIS group. It's not that the companion has to do anything but ask questions, and the Doctor is the one that resolves everything. But it doesn't need to be the other way around either. It doesn't need to be where the Doctor just kind of bumbles around for the whole episode, and the companion is the one that ultimately saves the day, like it was last week. In this episode, it was a good mix. Both roles were more or less equalized, but at the end of the day, the Doctor was the character that was the lead role. He was the one that was trying to assess the situation, try to figure out what was going on, and try to find a solution. I also liked the pacing of this episode. This episode did a very good job of filling out the plot, explaining the story to the audience at a gradual pace, where it maintained a level of suspense. It kept the audience engaged. It kept me interested. I was looking to the Doctor for answers. I was, looking for the Doctor to kind of put the pieces of the puzzle together and work out what was going on here. And that, to me, is what encompasses a good Doctor Who episode, a good story for Doctor Who, whether it be the original series or New Doctor Who, is when you can maintain a sense of suspense and mystery there, where the Doctor is put in a position where he's trying to put the pieces together and try to figure out what's going on. That is what encompasses a good episode of Doctor Who. This is probably going to be a really short review because I don't have a lot to rant about. I like that they kind of veered away from that teal and orange thing that they just oversaturated with it the last couple of seasons. Like the exterior scenes in Before the Flood, was it last season? I mean, it was borderline just black and white. It was so oversaturated with cyan color filtering, and I hate that shit. I don't know why that ever became a trend, and I don't know why anyone in the the movie industry thinks that looks good. So I liked how this episode more or less maintained a natural color. The exterior shots when they're out in the wheat field, they look beautiful. So the TARDIS was like a rich blue, and like the wheat was like a really golden brown. It's the way it should be, the way it would look as if you were actually there. So I'm always a proponent of natural color. I hate that color filtering, color gradings, teal orange bullshit. The robot design, I mean, I went into this, I had kind of misgivings about the whole they speak emoji kind of thing, but I'm glad that they didn't make that as much of a pop reference as I thought they were going to. I thought it was going to be like literally like an episode about emojis, about killer emojis, and that ended up not being the case. That one scene that's in the trailer where Bill says they speak emoji, I think that literally was like the only reference to the emojis in the entire episode. So it wasn't that really big of a deal to me. I'm just glad that they didn't make it. They did. It was about robots who communicate with faces. It wasn't robots that communicate using emojis. It's not literally emojis. It's just that that was Bill's interpretation of what the robots use as a form of communication. And I kind of figured that's probably what the case was. I didn't think that they would, seriously, surely Moffat wouldn't drop the bar that low. But anything is possible with him. The writer for this story, the Frank Cottrell Boyce, or however you pronounce his name, to me, this episode is light years better than the last contribution that he did to the story, to the series, which was In the Forest of the Night, and that was, what, 2 seasons ago? Was our last season? I can't remember. The In the Forest of the Night was a horrible episode. I didn't like it at all. And I don't know that how much of a hand that Moffat had in the writing of this one, but I do know that Boyce was able to deliver what to me is a proper Doctor Who formula for a good Doctor Who story. I guess that's really it. I mean, I was making mental notes as I was watching it, and I was noting things that I liked and things that I didn't like. And at the credits, you know, I had pretty much determined that the things that I liked outweighed the things that I didn't like. So, in my view, must have been a pretty good episode, because all of you know that I'm not an easy Doctor Who fan to please. So it must have done something right if it pleased me. Okay, the things that I didn't like about this episode are really just kind of nitpicky, and then they're not that big of a deal, but the first thing that I didn't like was I think that the incidental music was overused a little bit. I mean, it was almost continuous throughout the entire episode, because the scenes that worked the best were scenes when there was no background music, when it was just, everything was quiet, and all of my attention is on what the Doctor is saying or what Bill is saying. There were a lot of scenes that had incidental music that I just didn't really feel like needed it. I mean, it didn't really. I realized that I think that they were trying to add a particular mood to the scene, but to me it just didn't really. It didn't help any. It didn't add anything to the scene that I wasn't already feeling. I have noticed in the last week's episode and this episode that Moffat seems to have dialed back the incidental music a little bit. It doesn't seem quite as intrusive, and there are actual, like, almost whole 10 to 20 second scenes where there's not any music at all, and so it's actually incidental music, and it's not a track almost continuous through the whole episode. I do like that, but it needs to be dialed back a lot more than that. You shouldn't have to rely on the soundtrack to set the mood for the scene you're writing. I mean, the way the scene is written and presented, it should be able to do that for the most part. The music should be just kind of like icing, just something sprinkled on the top. Okay, the other thing that I didn't like about this one was there's still this problem that New Doctor Who is having, where you get an episode like this where it's overall it's a pretty good, it's a well presented, well written episode, and the pacing for the first 30 minutes or whatever is on par for what you would expect from a Doctor Who episode, but as a result of that, the resolution to the story has to be crammed into the last 5 to 10 minutes of the episode. The episode goes from gradually unfolding the plot and gradually unfolding the story to just light speed right in the last 10 minutes, and you kind of rush through the resolution. The last 10 minutes of the episode covered a lot. You know, it covered waking up the colonists and explaining to them what's going on, and the Doctor trying to work out how to resolve the situation, because that changed things. Like the initial plan was to blow up the city, but then when they found out that there were colonists there in hibernation, that changed things, and the Doctor was back to square one. He had to reformulate his plan. To me, that just came a bit late in the day. You know, it was just like I figured, I was like, geez, it's like there's only like 10 minutes left in this episode. Now you've put the Doctor back in a position where he was like 15 or 20 minutes ago. I'm fine with the resolution. I'm fine with, like, to me it was resolved reasonably to me. That's not my problem with it. It's just that I think the pacing was a little too fast in the last 2 minutes. Okay, about the only other thing that I can think of that I didn't really like about this episode was the colonists were wearing what appeared to be present-day Earth clothing. They were wearing like present-day Earth street clothes. And this is supposed to be 1,000 years into the future. You can have them wearing some futuristic clothes, and it's not like the audience is not going to understand who they are or what they are. Okay, you've already established that the TARDIS is in the future, that we're in the future. So, I'm just looking at it from a realistic point of view. I mean, in 1,000 years, fashion is going to change dramatically. Okay, because it's done so in the previous 1,000 years. So it would be absurd to think that in 1,000 years from now, people are still going to be wearing the same clothes that they're wearing today. Like, they didn't take enough time to put enough thought into what the people would be wearing in the future. So that's about it. I mean, overall I enjoyed the episode. Like I said, there was just a couple of little things there that I noted that I didn't really like about it, but for the most part, it didn't hurt the episode enough to the point to where I couldn't enjoy it. This is an episode that I could probably see myself watching again sometime in the future. And if I can walk away from an episode of New Doctor Who with a desire to watch it again, kind of like I was with Heaven Sent last season, then to me that is a strong indication that it was a pretty good episode. I don't know. It was a breath of fresh air from last week's episode, and I'm thoroughly impressed. Because when I found out that Boyce was going to be writing this one, I was a little concerned because given that his last story was In the Forest of the Night, and In the Forest of the Night was a very kid-friendly kind of fantasy storybook type approach. I know Boyce is known for writing kids storybooks, but this is Doctor Who. This is not a kid's storybook, so you can't do that here. I mean, people actually died in this episode. There was a death scene where a guy gets shot or something. Or somebody gets shot and they get disintegrated into bones or whatever. So I mean, there were skulls, and there was a dead person laying on a bed or something. I mean, it's like night and day compared to what Boyce contributed last season, or the season before, or I can't even remember which one it was. If every episode of the season could at least get up to this point of quality, I would consider it overall a pretty good season. So anyway, that's my review of Doctor Who and Smile. That was one other thing I didn't really like. I didn't really care for the episode title at all. I thought it was kind of silly. But that's my review. I hope you enjoyed it. I may have disappointed some of you because I didn't have anything to rant about in this one. But I guess I'll see you guys next week.